The S listened to this exciting story about a stepmother with a heart of stone. She forced an orphan girl to marry a poor man, not knowing that the man was secretly a billionaire. Stepmother thought this would be the end of the girl's life, that she would die poor, full of pain and sadness. But destiny had a very different plan. Will the cruel wishes of the stepmother come true? Or could this painful road lead the girl to a greater, unexpected future? Welcome to this touching story of rejection, true endurance, and surprising redemption. A story that shows us that a person's destiny is not written by humans, but by the greater power of life. Grace was born in great sadness. Her mother died only minutes after giving birth, at Tumani Government Hospital. The nurses explained that her death came from long and difficult labor. Her father, Johnson, stood in the hospital corridor holding his newborn baby with one arm, while the other hand wiped away endless tears. With a voice full of pain but also hope, he gave her the name Grace, meaning luck and blessing. He believed that this name could change her life's path. For the next 7 years, Grace was Johnson's whole world. Every Sunday, he carried her on his shoulders to church. Every morning, he tied her school ribbons. Every night, he told her stories in their mother's Yoruba language, whispering prayers for her as she slept. But Johnson was only human, lonely, troubled by the words of relatives who often told him that a little girl needed a mother's love. Then he met Madame Treshaw, a beautiful widow with one daughter. Johnson believed she was a gift from God. And at first, it truly seemed like a blessing. Treshaw was loving, kind, and caring. She treated Grace like her own child, even calling her my daughter. She bought her dresses to match those of her own girl, Naomi. Every morning, she prepared both children for school, and they ate together happily like one big family. But one day, when Grace was in Form 3, her life suddenly changed, like lightning striking from a clear sky. It was an ordinary morning. Johnson was at work as a construction supervisor in Juba, on the edge of the city. He stood on the second floor, giving instructions to the workers mixing cement below. But suddenly, a large support pillar that was not strong enough slipped. Heavy stones waiting to be lifted fell straight where he stood. He had no time to escape. In only seconds, there was a terrible crash, and dust filled the air. Johnson died instantly. News of the tragedy spread fast, like wildfire. When Grace reached Juba Hospital and saw her father's body covered with a white sheet, her cries tore through the silence of the ward. She collapsed on the floor, holding her chest in unbearable pain. Naomi hugged her tightly, crying too, while Treshaw stood aside, her eyes showing something hidden behind her sorrow. But after the funeral, everything began to change. Treshaw was no longer the caring mother who called Grace my daughter. Slowly, she turned Grace into a servant of the house. She ordered her to do all the heavy work, washing clothes, cooking, sweeping, even sewing Naomi's dresses. She began abusing her both physically and emotionally, telling her clearly, "I am not your mother, and I owe you nothing." And as if that suffering was not enough, Treshaw started planting a dangerous idea. She said Grace must marry early, so she would leave the house. She pushed her towards a poor young man in the village, a boy who carried sacks of charcoal, dug latrine pits, and hauled heavy loads in the market for small daily pay. The boy's name was Boni. He was quiet, respectful, and his eyes showed kindness. But the people of the village did not know much about him. No one knew where he came from or who his family was. He had just appeared in the village a few years earlier, taking any job of sweat and struggle without complaint. Treshaw believed that marrying Grace to this poor boy would remove her from the house like unwanted rubbish. She saw this marriage as a quick way to free herself from the burden of raising an orphan. But in her cruel plan, there was one thing Treshaw did not know, that the poor boy carrying loads in the market was not an ordinary man at all. One day, Treshaw made a final decision, one that would change Grace's life forever. That Saturday morning, the sun rose gray and dull. The wind was soft but strangely cold. As Treshaw washed dishes at the door, she saw Boni passing by with a hoe on his shoulder, heading to the farm. At that moment, an idea came to her. "Boni!" she shouted. Boni stopped and turned. He was carrying his hoe, sweat running down his face. Yes, Mama, he answered respectfully. I need help in the farm. The maize must be weeded quickly. Can you come now? Boni nodded. I am ready, Mama. They went to the farm together. Treasure gave him the work without many words. She told him she would pay him tomorrow because she had no money that day. Boni was patient. He worked hard, weeded the maize, prepared the soil, and planted the remaining seeds. But that night, something strange happened. Treasure sat in the living room quietly. She had finished all the housework, but her heart was not at peace. At 7 o'clock in the evening, she called Grace into her room. The girl was very tired, her eyes red with sadness and work. Grace, Treasure began in a cold voice. Life is hard. I am not your mother, and I cannot keep you anymore. So I have decided one thing. Tomorrow, you will be Boni's wife. I have spoken to him. You leave tomorrow. Grace was shocked, as if she had been burned by fire. She stood trembling, her mouth shaking. Mama, please don't do this to me. I cannot. Don't call me Mama. Treasure cut her off angrily. I said tomorrow you marry Boni. Get ready. Grace fell to the floor and cried bitterly. She remembered the happy times with her father. She remembered Johnson's strong arms that always kept her safe. But now, she was alone, facing a dark and unknown future. That night Treasure did not sleep. She tried to convince herself she was doing the right thing. She tried to close her eyes, but each time she saw Johnson's face looking at her with sadness. She pulled her blanket tightly, but the cold still entered her heart. That night, she cried, for the first time since Johnson died. But it was not tears of regret, only tears of fear and worry. The next morning, the sun rose shyly, as if it knew something bad was happening. Boni arrived early, knocking on the door, his face full of respect as always. He expected payment for his work the day before, even if it was just a few coins. Treasure looked at him for a moment before saying, Boni, I have no money to pay you. Boni stayed quiet, surprised. It's all right, Mama. I cannot force you. But before he could finish, Treasure went inside and came out pulling Grace by the hand. Here is your payment, she said with despair. Take this girl. Marry her. I have nothing else to give you. Grace was wearing a simple kitenge. Her face was swollen from crying. She looked like a dry, hopeless tree. Treasure said no more. She pushed Grace towards Boni and turned back into the house, tears running down her face. Boni looked at Grace for a long time. He said nothing. He could see sadness in her eyes that was stronger than words. He knew she had not chosen this. But deep inside his heart, Boni also knew. This was the beginning of something greater. The destiny he had waited for had now arrived. With kindness, he held Grace's hand. Come, let us go, he said softly. They walked silently through the village paths. People stared at them in shock. Some laughed, others whispered. Boni didn't care. He led Grace to a small mud house at the edge of the village, a place people called Small Town. The house was simple, with an old iron roof, but inside it was neat and peaceful. Grace, Boni said gently when they arrived, I know you did not choose me. I know this happened suddenly. But I promise you, I will never hurt you. You are safe here. Grace did not answer. She sat by the door, holding her face in her hands. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not from the cold, but from deep pain. Yet, somewhere inside her heart, a tiny spring of hope began to flow. She didn't know that this poor young man, whom her stepmother despised, was hiding a big secret. A secret life, full of wealth, wisdom, and purpose. Grace's journey had only just begun. The days that followed were not easy. The villagers laughed at her. Some mocked her loudly, others with cruel stares. They saw the once beautiful girl who used to wear modern dresses, now walking with a basket on her head, wearing a plain kanga, her face full of sorrow. So she ended up with the load carrier, some whispered. Why does she look so tired already? Others added with mockery. But among them all, the only voice of comfort Grace ever heard was Boni's. Even though he had little, his heart was full of gold. Every evening when he came back tired, He would greet her with a smile and say, "Do not give up. One day, you will laugh again." He kept working hard. In the morning he left with his hoe or wheelbarrow, looking for any job of the day. Sometimes he dug pits, sometimes he carried sand at construction sites, and sometimes he even helped at the market or church for free. But every evening, he always came home. And strangely, every time, he took out a big, expensive-looking phone from his pocket. The phone shone brightly, very different from his poor lifestyle. Grace wanted to ask, but she was afraid. One day she tried, "Your phone. It is very nice." But Boni quickly smiled calmly. "Grace, some things must wait for the right time. Please don't tell anyone about this phone. Not everything that shines can be explained quickly." Grace kept quiet. She learned to accept many things without questions. But in her heart, she began to feel peace. That's the end of part 1. But the story is just beginning. The biggest twist is yet to come in part 2. Make sure you don't miss it. Hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when it drops.